Check the kitchen. You're being broadcast, Baruch. So. Good evening, Ruth, Marjorie, Chagai, and Margot. To Mick, Michal. I am going to share just on a couple of more places here. Good evening, Kayla Gittel. Good evening, Malt. Javi's away, so I'm broadcasting from my house. It was either that or canceling class, but we missed already last week. We can't just do that, so we got to keep the Torah flowing. There we go. Okay. We've shared it on all the platforms. With the fireplace on, it's a chilly night. Montana's about to get another couple days of minus 20 and minus 25. Some exciting temperatures. Chleis is right. Some exciting temperatures are coming our way. But it is Parshas Boy. Today was the third day of the month of Shvat. And that means that this coming Shabbos is not only the portion of Bo in which we read about the Exodus from Egypt, which is obviously the primary focus of the Shabbos, but it's also the Shabbos that precedes the great day of Yud Shvat. Remember, if today's, one more person has to get in. So if today's the 3rd and tomorrow's the 4th, 5th, 6th, so the 10th should be Wednesday. And let me just let some people into the Zoom. The 10th is Wednesday. The 10th is Wednesday is the 10th of Shvat, so next Wednesday, a week from today. And the 10th of Shvat, Tuesday night and Wednesday, is the day that the previous Chabad Rebbe passed away in 1950, which means it's the day in which the Rebbe's leadership as the leader of the Chabad movement in our generation came to fruition. So it's a very big day on the calendar, and we're going to see whether the Parsha Bo, which we read this week, is interconnected to the great day that follows on the 10th of Shvat. So, in Parshas Bo, this third portion in Exodus, there's a very, before the Exodus. So, right, we always talk about the Exodus, the 10 plagues, the splitting of the sea, the exciting parts that are, not going to take away. They're pretty exciting. But there's a moment that happens before. So, the Exodus from Egypt was on the 15th of Nisan. 14th at night begins the process of the Exodus from Egypt. But before that, there's a moment in the 5th reading in the portion. So it's chapter 12, verse 21. And I'm quoting from the Chumash that we use, which is the Life Chumash. Moses summoned all the elders of Israel and said to them, draw from your own flock or buy for yourselves sheep for your families and slaughter the Passover sacrifice. Right, so he's giving them the commandment of taking a sheep that eventually is going to be slaughtered as a Paschal lamb, as an offering for the Karban Pesach, which became eventually the mitzvah that every eve of Pesach, Erev Pesach, Jewish people would bring an offering. But the original Passover, he said, take a lamb, a sheep. Then he says, you should take a bunch of hyssop and immerse it in blood that is at the basin. You shall touch the lintel and the 2 doorposts with some of the blood that is in the basin, and you have to sprinkle blood in 3 places on the doorpost on the night of Pesach, and that's how the firstborn Jews are going to be saved from the plague of the death of the firstborn. But here's where it gets interesting. When did they take? When were they supposed to take the sheep and bring it home? What was that? So actually, we are told that on the 10th day of Nisan, so 5 days before the Exodus, that was the day that they were told to take the sheep to their homes, tie it to their bedpost. In other words, keep it at their homes, make it visible, right? They didn't live in 6,000, 10,000 square foot mansions. They were slaves in Egypt. So they lived in in a cabana if they were lucky, a cabin, a tent, a chves, whatever they lived in. But they were to take the sheep home, make it visibly available for all to see, and then on the 14th day, Erev Pesach, they were going to shecht it, they were going to slaughter it, and bring it as a Paschal lamb offering. Why did they have to take it on the 10th day? In other words, let's talk basics. Very good, speak up.
To humiliate the Egyptians or to humiliate Pharaoh.
So Seth Baruch, who's here in person, says that the reason they were to take it so many days early was to humiliate or to embarrass Pharaoh and the Egyptians. Because the sheep was their god. Ad Khan, up until now, is what Baruch said. Now, the sages tell us that the Egyptians worshipped their sheep, and when they come to the Jew and say, hey, by the way, why do you have my idol in your front yard tied to your house or tied to your bed? So the Jews are to respond to the Egyptians and tell them that we're holding on to the sheep because we're going to slaughter your sheep and bring it as an offering to God. Now, here's the problem. That's what the Medrash says. The problem is that we know that the Egyptians worshipped the sheep. Right? That's why when Moses was speaking to Pharaoh, what did Moses tell Pharaoh? Moses told Pharaoh back when they were negotiating getting out of Egypt, every time he negotiated with Pharaoh, he said to Pharaoh, let us go worship our God in the desert. In other words, we don't want to do it here. If we do it here, they're going to stone us, he told Pharaoh. Why would they stone him? Because they're using their idol as a sacrifice. So he told Pharaoh clearly he wants to go do it in the desert. So suddenly now, right, God says to Moses to tell the Jews, take the sheep, put it by your doorpost or by your bedpost, make it in your home, make it visible. And when they ask you what it's all about, you should answer unequivocally, clearly, no stuttering, no second guessing, no trying to get out of it. Just say straight up, I have this sheep tied to my house because God asked me to, and God wants me to bring it in a couple of days as an offering for a carbon Pesach, for a Passover lamb. Well, what's novel over here is that we have to remember that the Jews in Egypt were in a very, very low state of spirituality, the lowest actually. It says that they were so deep, so sunk into the impurities. I'll get to that in a minute, Jim, Yaakov. They were so deep in the impurities of Egypt that it says had they not left Egypt at the moment that they did, they were sunk into the 49th level of impurity. Had they reached the highest level of impurity, which is level 50, they would have never gotten out of Egypt. It would have been the no return. So here's a group of people who are spiritually dysfunctional. Some of it due to slavery, some of it due to spiritual malpractice. And they were given a mitzvah that on the 14th day they're going to slaughter a lamb. Now here's a group of people that were so low that it says they were naked of mitzvahs. There was nothing there. They had nothing to present on their behalf, sort of as their spiritual defense. There was nothing doing. And yet when God said, in order to get out of Egypt, what you have to do, this is it, guys. You have to take the idol of Egypt in their face, put it in your house, not hiding, but in public. And if they ask you, what are you up to? Tell them unequivocally that you're going to slaughter their idol to your God, the God that they had no interest in whatsoever. And the Jews did it. These impure, problematic, spiritually challenged Jews took the sheep and did exactly what they were told, which was an act of self-sacrifice, of mesirut nefesh, because the Egyptians potentially could have just, out of defense, right? The Egyptians could have defended their idol by killing the Jew. They didn't, because at that point the Egyptians wanted the Jews to get out already because they had enough. The only one that was still stubborn was Pharaoh. But the point is the Jews didn't know that. The Jews acted with total mesirut nefesh, with total self-sacrifice, not knowing how it would be accepted, despite the fact that they were spiritually dysfunctional.
The Egyptians just let them go because they wanted them out.
Egyptians didn't want, we're talking here after the 9th plague already. There was only one plague left at this point, which is the 10th plague, which was the death of the firstborn. Most of Egypt wanted them out. Even Pharaoh's ministers wanted them out. It was only Pharaoh who was so stubborn. And so it's a very foundational idea. And what I share with you tonight is from the Rebbe's talk actually on Passover, the last day of Passover in 1952. What we learn in this story more than anything else is that even when Jews are down in the dumps, if you wish, even when they're not following the program, if you wish, they still have the ability to have total mesirus nefesh, total self-sacrifice when push comes to shove, when they're put up against the wall. And it's a very, very fascinating concept. It goes even further. It says, the prophet Micah, the prophet Micha says, that just as when the Jews left Egypt, there was incredible miracles and wonders. When the Jews leave, when we together, the Jews of our generation, leave the exile and go to Mashiach, to Eretz Yisrael, to the land of Israel, we will also see miracles and wonders similar to the Exodus from Egypt, which means that the state of being of Jewry, the state of being of the world and the Jewish community in this era leading up to the coming of Mashiach has a lot of similarities and should have a lot of similarities with the state of the Jews when they were leaving Egypt. And it's not just a parable. It's not just a metaphor. It's practical. So just like when the Jews were leaving Egypt, we saw that despite their flaws and despite their spiritual challenges, there was an inner strength of mesirut nefesh, of sacrifice, that they were ready to stand up with the idol of Egypt and say, we're going to do what God wants from us at the end. We could see, and we should expect to see in this era as well, that even Jews who may not necessarily be fully in sync with all the mitzvahs, or maybe even most of the mitzvahs, doesn't mean that they're not going to have within them the stolz, the conviction, the confidence to stand for what's right when the Jewish people are put against the wall and they have an opportunity for redemption. And this is a thought that, right, this is, you have to put yourself for a moment into the Rebbe's state of thinking. The Rebbe saw in humanity the best that you can see in a human being. So sure, you can look at the world and say, well, yeah, sure, confidence and self-sacrifice for God, maybe confidence and self-sacrifice for Wall Street, maybe confidence and self-sacrifice for Miley Taylor, if it's Miley Swift, Taylor Swift, whoever the latest chacham, the latest genius that everyone on TikTok is following. But self-sacrifice for God seems foreign. Says the Rebbe, no. If you would have spoken to the Jews in Egypt, you don't think they would say it's foreign? But there was a moment of clarity, a moment of authenticity. And when that moment hit, they were able to have total self-sacrifice, total mesirus nefesh. Someone says, can't keep kosher. What do you mean you can't keep kosher? You know how many? There's probably 100,000 Orthodox Jews that went on vacation this week because it's called Yeshiva week. Most of the yeshivas in New York and LA have the week off. And they're all over the place. They're in, obviously, probably 80,000 of them are in Florida, right? Because Miami. And the rest are in all over, Caribbean and the Cayman Islands. There's 3 minions a day packed at my brother-in-law's Chabad house in the Caymans this week. In Puerto Rico, my brother's in Puerto Rico. Anyone that has kids in yeshiva, they're running all over. To Aruba, to San Lucia, to Hawaii, right? They're all over. You think they're going and they're not keeping kosher because they left New York? Of course they're keeping kosher. Someone says it's impossible. It's 2023. I'm going to keep. It's amazing that at the right moment, boom, there's clarity, and suddenly there's Shabbos, or suddenly there's kosher, or suddenly there's mikvah, or suddenly there's a yarmulke, or suddenly there's Shabbos candles, or suddenly there's Yom Kippur. I'll tell you a credible story. It happened yesterday. Story. Fresh off the press. No one's heard about it. 2 weeks ago, I got a text from a Jewish mother here in town. Jewish mother married to a non-Jewish fellow, and they have 2 children, and their 10-year-old child is a little conflicted. Christmas trees, Hanukkah menorahs, where does she stand? Where do they stand? Where's their relationship with God as a Jew? So the mom tried to answer some of the questions, but it wasn't working. So the mom finally said, why don't you go speak to the rabbi? 10 years old. So yesterday, sitting here by the fireplace for an hour and 10 minutes, the mother and the daughter sat here for an hour and 10 minutes, and the kid is a smart kid, had really good questions about what we believe and how we believe and where does Judaism versus other religions. Incredible conversation that will probably be the first of many conversations to come. I looked at this child, I said, you don't understand, this is my dream come true. For this, it was worth moving to Montana. The whole Montana thing was worth for this. That a Jewish girl at 10 years old is spending an hour and 10 minutes fabranging with the rabbi, with her mom at her side, answering questions about Jewish holidays and about belief. So we can't just sit by and say, well, it's exile, 49 levels of impurity. This is what it is. The world is going to hell. Judaism doesn't have a future. Babamaisis. At the right moment, 5 days before the Exodus, the Jews take a sheep and they tell the Egyptians right in their face, we have self-sacrifice. We are capable of total devotion to God, even if you threaten me with annihilation or threaten me with harm.
Bittul?
It's not bittul. Bittul, you could do in your basement hiding. You could do bittul. But to do bittul in the face of an enemy, that's called Mesirat Nefesh. That's called self-sacrifice. And the Rebbe says something very powerful that I think is so apropos to so many different aspects of the Jewish experience. He says, when you talk to a Jew about Torah, about mitzvahs, about self-sacrifice, they assume that you're talking about Shabbos or kosher or mikvah or modesty, right? The big ones. The Rebbe says, no. If a Jew is expected to have Mesirat Nefesh, if a Jew is expected to have self-sacrifice, then the first mitzvah that they should be showing that self-sacrifice is with Ahavat Yisrael, with their love for a fellow Jew, because that's the foundation of the whole Torah. And here it's interesting. The Rebbe said something in Yiddish here, which caught my eye when I was preparing for class, because the Rebbe says, don't be turned off by people who try to poo-poo you, basically, for going overboard with Ahavat Yisrael, with your love for your fellow. And I think this is what it means. You hear sometimes people say, you got to love another Jew, but you really have to go out of your way. I mean, come on. How far are you going to go for that? I mean, how much are you going to ignore about the fact that they are such self-hating Jews? You're going to go love them too? Yes. I didn't say, by the way, it doesn't say anywhere that it's always easy. It's not easy. Sometimes they espouse opinions in public that sound very anti-Jewish. I'm not just talking about anti-Israel, but anti-Jewish, self-hating, self-deprecating. And you say, I'm going to go try to put on tefillin with this person? I'm going to try to invite this person for Shabbos? I'm going to go express my love for them as a brother or sister? How could I? And in today's day and age, you hear it in various perspectives in the realm of politics. I'll meet with a super duper, right, famous conservative Jew, and someone will say, you know what, that person's, I don't know, fill in the blank. How could you meet with them? How could you take a photo with them with all the righteous indignation? Then one day I'll meet with a super liberal Jew, a socialist Jew. Someone asked me once, if Bernie Sanders came to Bozeman, would I invite him to the shul? I'd give him an aliyah. What do you mean I'd call him to? I'd give him an aliyah. First of all, I'd pay anything to hear him say the bracha by the Torah with that accent. It's worth everything just for that. But more than that, he's a Jew. Did you know that Bernie Sanders, when he was the mayor of Burlington, Vermont, helped get the first public menorah up in Burlington, Vermont? He didn't know that. You know why? He doesn't tell anyone. He doesn't want people to know. Doesn't work with you. But that's what he did, and that's what I'll remember. I'll focus on the good. I'll focus on the love. I'll focus on the brother and sisterhood. I'll focus on the fact that we're part of the same family, and I'll do it with Mesirut Nefesh, says the Rebbe. I'll do it with self-sacrifice. I'll be there for them, not just when it's easy and convenient, not just when we're at a federation dinner or at an 8-pack convention. I'll do it when it's in the boondocks and no one's watching, but it's the right thing to do because that's what we do for each other. And the Rebbe says over there, even if the person you're trying to speak to about their Judaism, briket. In Yiddish, the Rebbe said briket. You know what that means? They're kicking you. You're trying to convey Judaism to them. You're trying to embrace them, and they are kicking you. Instead of reciprocating, they're fighting back against you. So you say, maybe I should just back off.
Yeah.
That's it. Adkan. No, I'll keep talking to them until I get through. Not with rudeness, God forbid, not with toughness, but with conviction and a lot of love. Conviction and toughness are not the same. You have to be confident in what you're saying and what you're sharing and who you are, and keep going with sort of a healthy stubbornness, but with a lot of love. Don't rip their nose off, as they say in Yiddish. Arabreisen them nose. It's a Yiddish term, right? Don't be in their face. But with conviction and love, you don't give up. It's one of your own. And if you haven't succeeded, don't blame them. Don't say, well, if only they had. No, it's nothing to do with them. If you haven't succeeded in getting the message across to them, that's a reflection of you. You have to ask yourself, what can I do better that my word should come from my heart so that it will enter their heart? I heard a story just recently. I just heard a story that a couple in Israel came to one of the big rabbis. I forgot which rabbi. They came to the big rabbi and said, Rabbi, our child is not doing well spiritually, and we've done everything we can, and there's nothing left to do. The teacher came and said, I've done everything I could with the student. There's nothing left to do. So the rabbi said to the teacher, tell me, what's the student's name and their mother's name? The teacher was baffled. I don't know the kid's mother's name. So the rabbi said to the teacher, I thought you said you did everything you can for them. You didn't pray for them? If you pray for them in Judaism, when you pray for someone that's not well, that needs a blessing, you do them in their mother's name. The teacher didn't know the mother's name because the teacher hadn't opened up a book of Psalms, hadn't said Tehillim, hadn't prayed. When he said he did everything he can, he meant within the system of the school system. I called him into the teacher, I sent him to the principal, I gave him an assignment, I gave him a consequence, whatever the typical ups and downs of. You didn't do everything you can. You did a lot, but not everything you can. You didn't pray for the person. When we say we love another Yid and we should have a serious nefesh, self-sacrifice, ask yourself, if you cared about this person so much and you're trying to convey the message of Judaism, have you prayed for them? Have you prayed with tearful eyes, with a heart felt full of prayer to God to please have mercy on the soul of your friend who seems so lost and so distant, but you want them to be closer to their Jewish family? And just like during the Exodus from Egypt, when the Jews expressed that self-sacrifice with the lamb, with the sheep, it ended up resulting in the actual Exodus, but not just Exodus. It was an Exodus that was with. It was an Exodus with. They went with gold and silver. They left Egypt, right? They left with so much wealth. There was so much success. No one remained. Whoever was alive came out of Egypt, and the Egyptians all drowned in the Sea of Reeds. And the one guy who survived, which was Pharaoh, had a very miserable ending of his life when he moved to Nineveh. He moved to Iraq, and it didn't work out so well there either. He had a lot of tzaras. Same thing now. Our self-sacrifice for God should not be dependent on how we're doing one day or the other, whether we feel like we're spiritual dysfunction or not. There needs to be a moment of clarity, of authenticity, where we say, I'm going for it. And if the one mitzvah you have to pick to go for it should be the mitzvah of Avos Yisrael, it will shift your entire, there'll be a paradigm shift in your entire interaction with the world around you, because you'll stop judging to an extreme. It's not going to be about what their political views are. It's not going to be about what their religious status is. It's going to be about one thing and one thing only. How can I create more familial love between us? How can I create more connection between us? And I'm ready to go with that to the point of self-sacrifice. And it's really, what? Or brother-sisterly love, but yes, both. And it really, it's very interesting that the previous Rebbe, who I mentioned, the yard site is the 10th of Shvat. So this Shabbos, we're going to be blessing that incredible day of his yard site and the day that the Rebbe assumed the leadership of the Chabad movement, that his way of dealing with fellow Jews, and I'm not talking about in modern, right, in 2023, I'm talking about in the 30s and 40s, before his time, meaning it was before the time where modern forms of Jewish outreach was even a thing. He was doing that, but on steroids. He was doing that in an incredible way. You know, they once asked him, huh? Talking about the previous Rebbe.
No, I mean the one before him. Which, not this justice.
No, his father-in-law.
Oh, okay.
So they once asked him, right, because he was so into reaching and touching the souls of anyone he can get a hold of, no matter how distant they may have been. They once asked him, how could you do that when we know there are some Jews, if you get in Code of Jewish Law, there are certain rules about certain people who get to a point of no return, right? They get to the point where they're apostate Jews. They've given up on Judaism and moved to another faith, God forbid, or even symbolically have converted to another faith, right? There's a concept like that. It's called in Halacha, it's called the Yisrael Mumar, right? A Jew who's totally apostate or totally a rebel, but not just he doesn't keep Shabbos. He's totally moved away from the faith of Judaism. So they said to him, how could you love every single Jew no matter how distant they are? Remember, he was dealing with the old school communist Jews and socialist Jews in Russia and the former Soviet Union, the USSR. And they were really, really hardcore atheist, militant, combative, anti-Jewish Jews. And he treated them like part of the family, and people couldn't handle it. So they asked him, how could you do that when in Jewish law there are clear rules about a certain point of no return, and you're still treating these people that way? How do you reconcile your behavior, your positive treatment of Jews, and halacha? And he said that in the Code of Jewish Law there are 4 sections. The first section is called Orach Chaim, which is the laws of day-to-day living, including Shabbos and Yom Tov, Jewish holidays, and the Sabbath, and morning prayers and shul, all the basics. Then the second section is called Even Ezer. The second section is called Yair Deya, which is the laws of kosher food, non-kosher food, Isser V'Heter, things that are prohibited and permitted, kosher fish, right? All the laws of permitted and prohibited items. Then the third section is called Even Ezer, which are the laws of sort of like the social laws, like marriage and divorce and levirate marriage and documentation and childbearing, procreation. All those laws are in Even Ezer. The fourth section is called Chesed Mishpat. Those are civil law, laws of loans, and laws of din Torah that are going to a Jewish court of law, rabbinic tribunal, and laws of business. And he said at the end of Chesed Mishpat, the last section, in the last few sections, that's where it has the laws of what do you do with an apostate Jew. So he said, the way it works in the order, you have to go in the order. So I have to learn the first section of Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, and the second section, the third section, the fourth section, and only at the very, very end do you get to these laws that these people were questioning him about. And his point was, it's very easy to pick out a law. Oh, look, the law says you got to ignore this Jew, you got to distance this Jew. What about the 3 3/4 sections that came before that law, literally in the order of things, where it tells you 10,000 other things that you're supposed to do and not do? Are you also so careful about that? So when it comes to dealing with a fellow human being who is struggling, imagine what it takes psychologically for a Jew to renounce their own Judaism, God forbid. You know how psychologically messed up you have to be to do that? You know how psychologically and emotionally twisted you have to be to give up on the faith of Moses, the faith of Abraham and Sarah? Obviously, it's not a person who's doing it from a well state of being. Don't chase them away. Love, conviction. Don't get rid of your principles. Show them love. Sometimes the love is first expressed in doing something physical for them or materialistic. They need a favor, they need a loan, they need food, they need dinner, they need some clothing, they need their mortgage paid for, they need a car payment, they need to afford to go to the dentist. Many times it starts with doing them simply as a part of the family, doing them a physical favor. And obviously, as a Chabad rabbi, I have the merit of having many experiences like that, where I'm doing people who are not coming to shul, they're not spiritual, or at least they're not acting like they're devoted to the Torah mitzvahs, but they're Jewish and they need a favor, and that's what we do. Physically. Right? The Havana Geschmack, to enjoy doing a favor to another Jew. No strings attached. maybe you'll be lucky. You'll merit to also inspire them spiritually. But don't connect the two. They're not dependent on each other. The kindness that we share in itself is an incredible value, not only rewarding, it's an incredible valuable act of brother and sisterhood. That is what it means to be part of the Jewish family. And if you luck out, if you're blessed, if you merit that you also end up spiritually inspiring them, wonderful. But that's a bonus. And the judgments, how could you do that? Because they're in a bug off. Get away from that. First learn the first 3 3/4 sections of Jewish law. Thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of law and commentary. And then when you get to that section, I'm pretty sure you won't have the question in the first place. You'll realize that the context of those apostate Jews of old are not what we're dealing with today. Today we're dealing with people who simply don't know better, and therefore, because of circumstances, end up in places. And we're not talking about the people that lived in the days of Nachmanides, where they were deliberately choosing Christianity over Judaism, then going to debate Nachmanides about the validity of Judaism versus Christianity. That's not what we're talking about here today. We're talking about lost neshamas, lost souls who don't know any better, and therefore they shouldn't be judged. They should be loved. They should be uplifted with self-sacrifice. And if we do it with self-sacrifice, following in the footsteps of what the Jews did when they were leaving Egypt, putting the lamb by their bedpost, proclaiming that they are willing, despite their flaws, they are willing to have self-sacrifice for God and His mitzvahs, we too will merit redemption. We will merit the ultimate redemption when the third temple will be built in Jerusalem and it will never be destroyed again. When peace will reign on earth, when tranquility will be the way of life, when Mashiach Tzidkenu, when God will send us our righteous Mashiach, may He come and speedily redeem us. Yaveh v'yigalenu, may He come and redeem us. V'yelichenu k'memibus l'artzeinu, and take us upright to the holy city of Jerusalem. Imheira v'yameinu, amen. May it be speedily in our days, amen. Have a wonderful week. Ken Yehiratzon, says Baruch. Have a wonderful week, an inspiring week. Get ready for Yud Shvat. It's coming. It's a big day. 73 years from the day that the revolution of our generation kicked in to transform the world and make Mashiach a reality in real time. So get ready. The day is coming. We have 1 week. Sei gesund. Have a wonderful week and be inspired, be uplifted, and we'll see you soon. Sei gesund. Good night.